My name is Brock, and this is the Dungeon Master's Toolkit podcast.
If you'd like to help us make more content, consider joining the Patreon. You can also bookmark our affiliate links to Amazon and TTRPG to support the show with each purchase. Want a free way to help the show? Give it a review on your favorite podcast platform, or like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Finally, if you'd like to be on the show, or think you know a great guest, contact me on the Discord server or on Twitter. And with that, let's jump into the episode. Welcome, everybody. Today I have Cassi with me. Welcome, Cassi.
Hello. It's nice to be here.
Glad to have you, Cassi. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got started in tabletop role-playing games?
Oh my gosh. I am Cassi Mothwin, she, her. I've been in publishing tabletop role-playing games since my first official release in November of 2021. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games officially I started with Dungeons and Dragons in the winter of 2018. And sort of unofficially earlier than that because I always added a role play element to many of the board games that I would play. So I was kind of already playing them before I knew what tabletop role-playing games were. And the one that comes to mind is Eldritch Horror. I don't know if any of your listeners are board game people, but we really enjoyed role-playing the characters you get in that game, and the games always tend to last like 4 hours, so always a good time. So then when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons at the end of 2018, it just felt really natural to fall into tabletop role-playing, and then I fell in love with it and started writing and publishing things.
And was that D&D 5th edition?
It was, yeah. I tried 3.5 in college, but I was an English major and someone handed me a character sheet with a ton of numbers on it and wasn't my interest at the time.
Yeah, sometimes the character sheet is kind of secondary to the role-playing aspect, so...
I think if someone would have said this is a role-playing game where you can be a pretend elf and whatnot, I think my onboarding needed to be a little bit better in college. It was just, here's a character sheet with no numbers, good luck, or you have to fill out with no instructions, good luck. Read this book and figure it out.
Here's your tax documents.
Yeah.
And what do you find yourself playing or running now?
I'm still, oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to run so many different things. I went to Gen Con in 2022. And I picked up a lot of stuff. And over the last year, I've picked up a lot of stuff. But I started running 2 campaigns in the summer of 2020. So I guess the second campaign didn't start until November 2020. In the summer, I started Tomb of Annihilation, and my players are just now in the tomb. So I don't know if anybody has played Tomb of Annihilation, but my characters found a secret staircase and they ran straight to the 5th floor, literally yesterday. So that's where we're at there. And then my other campaign is Curse of Strahd, which we started in November of 2021. And we are still going through that, and hopefully that ends soon. My players are heavy role players, but I'm ready to explore. I've been reading some other games. I've been reading Heart. I've been reading Spire. I've been reading Slayers. I'm just so excited to tackle a variety of games in the future. I have run In the Light of Ghost Star by Nate Train, and that's a really, In the Light of a Dying Star. I can't remember the exact name, but it's a really rules light, fun, goofy science fiction game. We've run Sleepaway, Wander Home. Oh gosh, what else have we run? Bluebeard's Bride, just a lot in the last year. So the first year, 2020, was all D&D, and now I'm trying to wrap up these campaigns so I can throw even more at my group.
And when you're playing those other games, is that with your same game groups?
Pretty much, yeah. We have some players that kind of like plug in and plug out, that type of thing, or drop in and drop out, I guess is the better term. So my Tomb of Annihilation group and my Curse of Strahd group are 2 different groups with a little bit of overlap. One of them is more like beer and pretzel D&D, and the other is like, if I don't cry this session, it's not a good session. So there's different games appeal to both of those groups, and then they're both great. They're both very valid and extremely fun. But yeah, it's a good mix that I have players that are willing to just kind of like do whatever as long as we are having a good time.
That is the best kind of group.
Yes.
Is just to be having fun. So, what kind of prep do you do for your games?
So I have stopped prepping, to be honest. I'm looking more for games where I don't have to prep, or at least like my prep can be like 2 or 3 bullet points. I used to go into a session with at least 5 to 6 pages of notes and bullet points and potential character dialogue from NPCs. And I mean, I think there's still some room for that, especially for the NPCs that I want to have these really well done conversations, or I want their motivations and interests to be well spoken and articulate. I might have might be better if I had more notes for that. But these days, I roll into a session with just like a few bullet points and go from there. And they've been some of the best sessions because I find I'm not feeling so confined to my notes. I'm not feeling like the characters are missing something if they go the opposite way. I'm more flexible in adjusting as the session goes. Again, we're missing some of that like precision that I enjoy with the fully fleshed out notes, but it's just so satisfying to open up your Google Doc and have 6 bullet points and you go through 3 of them and the rest is just you kind of just adjust them as you go. It's really satisfying.
And do you feel that your experience kind of with the prep before is helping you now with reduced prep?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think especially with the games that we have, the NPCs, the players have met most of the NPCs they're going to met. They visited most of the towns and locations they're going to visit. So I don't really need to prep like store locations or inventories or NPCs or anything like that. So I unfortunately have the bulk. I guess unfortunately isn't the right word, but I fortunately have the bulk of the work behind me. So now it's more so, what do I need? Whose name do I need to remember? Because they might talk to that person tonight. But otherwise, that's it. That's all I do. But thankfully, I've had I guess 2 years of prepping, so we're good.
Yeah, you've got a lot of the kind of introductory legwork out of
hmm
the way, and now it's just okay. What do the players do? Who do they talk to?
Yeah, yeah. And my players are also extremely great at talking with me. So, and it's something that I think all of us sort of like, we're all learning how to be better at tabletop games. And I think one thing that everybody can always improve on is conversation, just talking to each other, right? Communication. So I've gotten better about being like, where do you all think you're gonna go? What are your goals? And we talk about this stuff sort of outside of session. Are there any things is there anything that you really want to do but you don't think you're gonna do next session? And it's just they might not have all the answers, and those answers might change too by the time we get to the session. But having those conversations, and then if they say they want to do something that I just am not ready to do, I will say that. I will say that in the middle of a session. I'll say, guys, I don't have that dungeon prepped, or I don't have that room ready. Why don't we come up with an in-game reason why it doesn't make sense for your characters to go that way? Do we want an NPC to stop them? Do we want like their carriage wheel to break and they just can't go forward for the night, and then next session we can get it fixed and progress from there? And they're pretty good about just being flexible with me. I think there's a good give and take there in that conversation.
Yeah, I think that that's a really cool idea to include your players on that kind of and coming up with a storied reason why some like, a storied reason for a meta problem
Right, yeah.
essentially.
And it
Um
it kind of reminds me of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. They really limit your exploration in the beginning until you like unlock items. So for example, you can't go to see the Zoras until you have a bomb to get rid of some rocks. So I was like, I think so one of my gatekeeping things was like, you guys can't go to this certain place until you get your winter clothes, and your winter clothes aren't going to be ready until I'm ready for you guys to go to that certain place. So that's been sort of like it's an in-game reason they don't go to this place everyone keeps telling them to go to, because they know their winter clothes are going to take a few weeks to get made. But it also helps their characters makes sense in their characters' heads why they can't move forward.
Game design.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I like that your players are flexible with you on that as well. I know I've definitely had sessions where I've tried to run something that I wasn't quite prepped for that should have, maybe we should have ended early or we should have done something else, but we, just try to kind of improvise it and sometimes those don't always turn out super great when you haven't had just even if it's not a lot of prep, but just time to think about, what's kind of coming next.
Oh yeah, 100%. Sometimes I'll be like, let's see what happens, and sometimes I'm like, I really want this thing, I really want to do it well, and I feel like it'll be fine. We're always gonna have fun. My group is always great about rolling with the punches, but I feel like I won't deliver what I want to deliver unless we end early or we find something else to fill the time for a little bit. And they're totally understanding of that. They know that I really care about our sessions and our campaign, and they really care about it too. So anything we can do to take the pressure off of each other, but also have a good time is really valuable for us.
How long do your sessions normally last?
Only 2 to 3 hours, but we do play weekly most of the time. But I just find that sweet spot is 2 to 3 hours. Sometimes we have long sessions where well, play is a strong word. We're mostly hanging out, but we will like be in the same room rolling dice probably for 6 to 8 hours. And those are only once every 6 months. We are enjoying an adult beverage. We are breaking for dinner. It's usually like a big boss session or there's a big story reason why we want to have that long session. So those are few and far between. Most of our sessions are only 2 to 3 hours, sometimes only an hour and a half. And honestly, they're great. We get everything we need out of them.
Especially if the timing or the tempo of things lines up and it just makes sense to end short. I think that's probably better than going long and drawing things out in a unsatisfying way.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. 100%. And I really love to end on a cliffhanger if possible. I don't always push for that. But if it's 8:30, we usually end at 9:15. And if it's 8:30 and there's a really good cliffhanger, I'm going to be like, well, let's call it there and then talk about our theories for the next 30 minutes, which we will. And that's really fun too. I think even if the game is over, that's still a really fun part of the play because I will take their theories and pick the best one and make it true.
So do you have a little bit of time afterwards to just kind of decompress from the session?
Yeah, and it was something I had to ask my players for. I think they just get really excited and we do end on a weeknight. So we play on a weeknight, so of course we end on a weeknight. So and one of them has to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So as soon at actually 4. So as soon as we're done, he was packing up his stuff and like walking out the door and that kind of like instigated an exit for everyone else. And eventually I just said, hey guys, it's especially with our gothic horror campaign, I was like, I think I'm going to start ending these sessions a little bit early just so we can all talk because it does feel sort of weird for me to be in this headspace and then have everybody leave and it's just me in this headspace. And they were totally understanding. They were like, oh my gosh, of course. Yeah, we should have thought about that. So that just goes back to like, I mean, I play with adults. They're great at understanding, and anytime like we have a form of communication issue or something needs to be brought up, they're understanding, I'm understanding. It's a really great group we have.
And do you have any sort of is that just kind of a casual interaction time? You don't have any sort of like process or any like specific questions that you're
I've
asking?
I've tried to implement a process, but I have ADHD, which means that anytime I implement a process, if I don't have like something to remind me that process exists, I forget immediately. So the first process I tried to implement was like a complimentary chain, which was great. Like everybody loved it. Everybody was on board. I just forget that it exists. And I think we do it maybe once every few weeks when I finally remember that, oh yeah, we're supposed to be doing this. So at the end of every session, we're supposed to go through and compliment each other. No one's allowed to compliment me, the DM. They're only allowed to compliment like the other players. All the players can say that I did great. That's totally fine. Like I will take that, but you also have to compliment like another player. You can't just say, "Hey Cassie, you did a great job running tonight's session." No, I really want the players, especially in our gothic horror campaign where we can get in our minds like it's a horror campaign and things get sad, things get scary, things get dramatic, and I just think it's important we have that time to center ourselves. So even though now and more often than not it's not structured, I think my group is still really good about sort of following that where we won't sit in our little circle and go around and making sure everybody feels good in terms of like complimenting them, but we still kind of do it just like as we sort of recap the session briefly before everybody goes home. We'll talk about the things that really stood out to us that were great, that we loved about the session.
I see you post online a lot about solo RPGs. Would you like to talk about those?
Oh, sure. So I discovered solo role-playing games at the end of 2021. I had literally just published my first tabletop RPG supplement, which is called What Crooked Roots, and I wrote that for Dungeons and Dragons. And so I was looking to do something different. I just wanted to get out of the D&D space a little bit because I had been living in it so closely. I mean, I still am. But I just wanted to, open the window, let some fresh air in. And I saw this tweet fly by at some point, and it was about something called the Sealed Library. And I was like, what is that? And it was billed as this solo journaling game where you play a character who is like trapped in a library. You're trying to save books before invaders come and destroy everything you hold dear. And I was like, okay, interesting premise. Tell me more. And then as I kept reading, the main mechanic is a Jenga tower. And as you play the game, you pull blocks from the Jenga tower. The Jenga tower represents like the stability of your barricade in the library. And if the Jenga tower falls because you're pulling blocks out of it and compromising its stability, then you lose the game. Your character is likely dies of something or is captured by these invaders. And I just thought this Jenga mechanic was so interesting. So I went out and I bought a Jenga tower, and then I sat down and I put on some noise canceling headphones, and I found like a thunderstorm at the library YouTube ambient video, and I turned that on because it had a 3-hour playtime, and I was like, perfect. And I just kind of lost myself in this game, and it was such an experience. So this game comes with a lot of prompts, and you access the prompts by drawing cards from a standard deck of playing cards. So you'll draw like a 2 of clubs, for example, and then you'll go through the book and see what happens when you draw the 2 of clubs. And some of the cards will tell you to pull a block from the Jenga tower. And so I think it lasted me about 2.5 hours, and it was one of the best experiences, even though, I mean, it was about heartbreak and being alone and feeling hopeless. But it was still one of the best experiences I've ever had playing a game. And I was playing it all by myself. I was just writing in my little journal what happened and the people that I was thinking, my character was thinking on as they were playing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I need to explore way more, way more. And I've been playing a lot of solo journaling games. Not even solo journaling games. I've been playing a lot of solo games because there are also just solo role-playing games. Or they're more kind of board gamey solo games. There's like a whole world of solo games out there, and I'm just like trying to get my hands on all of them because I think they are extremely fun. And there's a ton of variety of them. I love that some sort of dance between a role-playing game, a journaling game, and a board game. One that comes to mind immediately because I just played it is called Untitled Moth Game, which is by S. Kaya J. And that game actually uses a Taroka deck, which people who play Curse of Strahd will be familiar with, but you can also use a tarot deck for that or a regular standard deck of playing cards. But I just think it's really fun that it uses the Taroka deck at first. And you lay those cards out, and you have a figurine that moves across the cards to discover things. And that's also a really cool way to explore prompts and explore a world and role play. And then I've released one solo game. I'm about to release a second one, and it's just, they're so much fun. I love that you can just bring so much of yourself into them.
Do you want to talk about your first solo game?
Sure. So the first solo game that I came out with, it's not really a role-playing game, but it's also kind of a role-playing game. It's a really weird game. It's called The Sticker Game, and I bill it as an audio drama journaling game. And you don't play it with dice or a character sheet, or you don't even have to really like journal like most journaling games. It's a game that I wrote and created specifically for people who collect stickers and then can never find the perfect place for their stickers. So I didn't want to make an activity book, which is how it started. I just realized I was making a sticker activity book, and that was fine. But I was like, I am someone who has to do something weird. So how can I make this concept more interesting and more of a game, more of something like you can like engage with and interact with. I don't want it to be a game people just print out and then they put their stickers in this thing and then like that's it. So that's where the audio drama portion of it came from. And you can still totally like just read the script because I made the script freely available. Once you buy the game, you can just like read the script if you don't feel like listening to the audio. But the audio element helps to sell the idea of the game. And the idea of the game is that you, whomever you are, so if I, Cassie, was playing the game, and you can obviously come up with another character, but it's written as if I, Cassie, were playing the game, I've been contacted by an agency in our world in Earth, and they have found out that I have a lot of stickers, and they want me to use my stickers to influence another reality. And I do that because in this other reality, this other version of myself, this other Cassie, who is called AU in the other world, or alternate you, they also have a lot of stickers. So because that Cassie has a lot of stickers that they use and I have a lot of stickers that I don't use, I can influence their reality, and this agency has a guide who will help me do that, and that guide is going to talk me through it, and that's where the audio portion comes in. So the whole time you're playing, this voice is telling you what to do with your stickers so you can influence your view's reality. And I just got a review today that said it is very funny, but it should also be hanging in an art gallery if that were possible for audio dramas. So take that however you will.
I love that.
Yeah, I was really
Uh,
excited to get that review. It was great.
I don't have a lot of stickers, but my daughter has a lot of stickers.
Yeah,
What is
yeah,
what's the age range on the game?
yeah. We have gotten that question a lot. I say we because while I am the primary writer and the audio producer and all of that for the game, my husband is the main voice talent for it, and he also did help write it. We didn't write it for children. That said, I think it's definitely playable by children. I think they can enjoy it. I just think they'll miss out on some of the more complicated concepts that we cover.
Cool. So something to look forward for her as she
Yeah,
gets older then.
for sure. I think our age, which I don't have children, so take this with a grain of salt, but I said 12 and up probably be best.
Makes sense. And let's see. So speaking of solo games, so you've got this one and then you have another one, correct?
Yeah, so the new one that I have coming out, I was taking a break from working on the sticker game, and I was supposed to be taking a break from working in general, and instead I wrote this other game called Tangled Blessings. And it is a magic horror. No, sorry, it is a magic school horror. So this game is either a solo game or a two-player game. And sorry, I'm laughing because it's crazy to me how fast it came about because I'm crowdfunding it in February. I'm not sure when this interview will air, so I don't know if the crowd fund is live, like go check it out. If it's not, hopefully it was a success. But so it's called Tangled Blessings, and it is a Magic Academy horror RPG for 1 to 2 players that uses tarot cards to reveal your fate. So essentially the game takes place 4 years after you've been at the academy and you are studying for your final exam. And your final exam is between you and your rival. You two are about to face each other. And essentially, before that happens, you're going to recall the last 4 years at the academy. So you're going to remember the events that happened in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And the events in year 1 are going to be pretty tame, but then as you recall years 2, 3, and 4, they're going to take on a more sinister, darker tone. They might involve secret societies, ghosts, devil's bargains, murder. So it's a horror game. I couldn't escape the horror. My first project in tabletop RPGs was horror themed, and I kind of immediately went back to it after doing 2 softer projects. But I'm really excited about it. Play test went really well. The play testers really enjoyed it. They had some really good feedback. And I've had some reviews from people who have played it since the play test. So they've played the press edition of the game. The game is mostly done. And more positive notes. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's pretty good. I don't see anything like this yet in the space, so I think it's fairly new. And what's great about it is you can play it if you aren't a big journaler in probably one session, so you can sit down and play it, or you can spread it out over a couple of sessions. But I estimate that it'll last most people 2 to 4 hours, I think.
I think one of the neat things about it is it being either solo or two-player. So if you have somebody that you want to engage with it, you can, there's rules to do it that way.
Yeah, and it's really easy too, and it's GM-less. So when I say two-player, I mean like there's no GM. Not one of you isn't going to be a GM while the other person gets to role play their time at the academy. You both play the game at the same time. And one of my playtesters is usually against GM-less games. He's primarily a GM, and he just doesn't. He's never really enjoyed a GM-less game. He plays them with me because he knows I enjoy them, but he's never enjoyed, like, Wander Home is one he hasn't enjoyed, and then also Sleep Away. Like, they have like similar systems. Those aren't for him. I love them, but they're just not for him, which is totally respectable. But I asked him to test out the two-player function in Tangled Blessings, and he said he really liked it. And he played it with his fiance, and they played it as a date night, and they said they both had a lot of fun, and it was pretty seamless, they said, for them to figure out how to play the two-player version. So it's not even that complicated.
I am hoping to get my wife to sit down and play it with me in the near future. So
Does she play role-playing games?
she will join in, like she plays in our D&D campaign, and she'll join into one-shots and
Oh,
stuff.
that's great.
She's maybe not quite as into it as I am. I'm also I read a rule book once and I remember everything. So she has a different exposure level to RPGs in general than I do. So
Yeah, that's me and my husband. I feel you 100%. He'll do if I learn something and I put it in front of him, he'll 100% play, but he's not. I mean, like, I love him, and I'm sure you love your wife, but they're not on the level. So what's great if you and your wife sit down to play, the first thing you'll find out is that you two are going to be each other's rivals during your duration at the academy. So you will both match each other in power, but you'll both be prodigies at the academy, and you will see what that means. I will say that a lot of people who play Tangled Blessings end up romancing their rival or having some sort of complicated relationship with their rival. You don't always have to, but it is something a lot of people fall into. So I encourage you to have fun with that however you will.
she's pretty competitive, so she's probably going to try to kill my character.
Yeah, that did happen.
But I am looking forward to giving that a shot.
I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
And I have not played a GM-less game like this before, so I think it'll be a good exposure for me as well to some of this other kind of side of role playing.
Oh, okay. So you haven't played like Wander Home or any of the like Belonging Outside Belonging games?
No, I haven't.
Oh man. Yeah. So what I think is so fun about them is, and I encourage you to give them a look because I think they even like helped me as a GM bring my other games to a different level of just story building. One thing I love about them is a lot of the they're not really classes, they're called playbooks. A lot of the playbooks encourage the players to ask each other questions, and they're just really interesting questions. And it's something I explored in my second game my second project that I released, which is called Clean Spirit. It's another GM-less game. It's token based, so you're passing tokens back and forth, and the tokens represent the motivation that you are giving to another character, and that character is giving to you. And I just think it's such an interesting way to have players, or I say players, I also mean their characters. I'm speaking interchangeably here. To have characters engage with each other is by asking these questions or by using these moves. And I think it helped my players I want to say this correctly. It helped my players think outside of their character in other games as well, I think, if that makes sense.
I think so.
So when you play a GM-less game, everybody has to do a little bit of a bigger lift, right? So you don't have one person that's making sure that everybody is involved or everyone knows who an NPC is, anything like that. When you play a GM-less game, you're all working together make sure that everyone is on the same page or that everyone understands the location and you're asking questions like, So, oh, this is your bedroom. Do you have a walking stick in here? Because I know you like to go hiking. And the player goes, yes, I have a walking stick in here. I also have a picture you drew me. What would you have drawn me? So, like, working together to like create things instead of the GM doing all by themselves. I think that these other GM-less games just sort of helped kind of build up our ability to do that.
So that's actually something like asking leading questions
Right.
like that
Yep.
is something that I really like to do just as a GM to get more input and buy-in from the players and just to offload some of the work of world building and stuff like that. I could see that being really beneficial for players to have that to
That's
just
what's
kind of
great is
loosen up
having
and
the
get.
players start to do that. It's really a game changer.
Yeah, and I know like talking to my wife, and sometimes it depends on the game master that you're playing with, but some are more open to like, give me ideas and then maybe that'll be true. And some are more like, no, it's exactly how I have it laid out and I'm not taking any input. And so sometimes that can be hard to navigate as a player if you don't know your
Session
GM.
zeros are so
Yeah.
important. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a conversation about expectations.
But then there is also, like you said, that skill there to just, if it's allowed, then a lot of times we don't necessarily flex that as players. So having a game where we can kind of practice that would be a good way to build that skill.
Yeah, I just it's such a good skill. And I mean, I'm not perfect at it. It's still a learning process. But I think that's one of the things where playing other games, even if you're like, no, I only want to play my high fantasy game the rest of my life. But your high fantasy game could be made better by exploring these other more narrative driven systems every once in a while.
And do a lot of these GMless games have shorter play times?
I think so. I haven't played all of them, obviously. So Wander Home, I think, lends itself more to long-term play as well as sleepaway. My game, Clean Spirit, is meant to be played in one session. It is GM-less. I'm trying to think of other GM-less games off the top of my head, and I know I have a list somewhere. I can't think of it, but there's a lot of them. I mean, if you just Google GM-less games, I'm sure you'll find a lot of them. And I'm trying, that's one of the things I'm advocating for too in the tabletop RPG space is for creators to be more specific about how long their games last. And I know they want to say, I know there's a hesitancy to do that because you want to say, well, I want it to last as long as people are having fun, right? That's how long it should last. But I also think being able to drop a time and say, hey, this game is best played at 3 sessions, or this game is best played at 1 session, or you can play this game as a one shot, but it really plays better across, 4 weeks or so of 1 hour sessions or something like that. I think that would be really beneficial to the scene and help bring people to more games. I do that for all of my projects, but so that's one of the reasons I can't think of any off the top of my head.
We've talked before. I think, did you say that Clean Spirits can be played with existing characters like from a different game?
Yeah. So a clean spirit is, I know that's kind of was the intention, is that you would bring your characters from other games into it and play it like that. It does have a world building introduction in case people are like, oh no, I want to just play clean spirit, I want to get in my feelings. But playtest, and that's fine. But playtesters did say that once they did that, they wanted to continue playing with their characters because it is a narrative relationship driven game. So, yes, bring your characters, or if you're going to play it with new characters, be prepared to get very attached to the characters you have.
Session one.
Yeah, and
Get
that's
your new
kind of,
characters.
yep. And I kind of like marketed that way. I was like, start your campaign with Clean Spirit, or have a beach episode where you're all just like in your feelings and just relaxing, kind of with an asterisk by that relaxed portion. Or end your campaign with Clean Spirit. It's another way you can say goodbye.
And you have one other product, right, that we haven't talked about?
I
What Crooked
think
Roots?
Yeah. Well, I talked about it briefly. Yeah, so What Crooked Roots is my first project that I ever did in the tabletop RPG space. It is my bestseller. It's what got my name out there. Fly Flourish called it out and it kind of exploded after that. And it is a folk horror encounter book. It has 15 folk horror encounters. They are not monster themed. One is, but the rest of them are just very unsettling encounters for when a party is traveling through the woods. It's designed for D&D, but it's also not very rooted in mechanics, so you can easily port it over to whatever system you like.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have a favorite encounter from the book?
I do. It's the longest one, and it's the one I think everybody else calls it out too. The book does have a mascot, and the mascot is the Groat Man. So if you see what Crooked Root somewhere and people are memeing about the Groat Man, he's become the mascot. And I think his encounter is great. He's the slasher, and it's the only like monster in the book that I made. But my favorite encounter is actually about two women beekeepers that the party will stumble upon, and they are very mysterious. They are very weird, as per most folk horror things, most folk horror people, I mean. And when they invite the party into their house, the party is just probably will be very uncomfortable because the house is just stocked with a lot of rotting honey and not much else. All of the cooking equipment is like covered in honey. There are just jars of honey on every possible surface and just nothing else that most humans need. So right off the bat, there's just this awkwardness, unsettlingness. And then the beekeeping women will ask the party to light a pyre for them in honor of their son. And there's a mystery there that the party can solve, and I don't want to give it away, but it's very good. I think most people have told me that it's their favorite encounter in the book. It's very interesting.
And for this book in general, what was your inspiration to write this?
Okay, I know I'm talking a lot about Curse of Strahd. Look, everyone, it's been 2 years, okay? It's all I've done, aside from Tomb of Annihilation, for 2 years. All right, I'm so sorry, but we're going back to Curse of Strahd. So I do every 6 months, or I should probably do it every 3 months. But every 6 months, I do a survey for my D&D groups or my tabletop RPG groups as we move away from D&D, just to see where they are, just to make sure like we're all on the same page, we're doing good. You know, check-ins are great. And one of my questions was, is there any horror you want to see more of, like a genre of horror? And Von Richten's Guide to Ravenloft had just come out, and it had sort of like explicitly stated like, here are all the genres of horror that you can explore in your games. And I was like, oh, okay, this will make it easy to ask this question. So I just kind of took those themes and I threw them in my survey. And overwhelmingly, the majority was, we want to see more folk horror. There is folk horror in Curse of Strahd that my party just hadn't accessed yet. They just hadn't made it to that part of the campaign. But I thought, okay, no harm in adding more. So I went to this Curse of Strahd Discord and I asked, hey, what kind of folk horror encounters are there? I was told that Von Richten's Guide to Ravenloft would have some stuff. It didn't have anything. And then so I was on Reddit asking, and no one had any replies for me. So in true Thanos fashion, I pulled the I'll do it myself. So that's how I started my very first tabletop RPG project. Was I was going to do this like, I was thinking, you know, a 20 encounter table, so you'd roll a d20 and like whatever you land on, that's going to be your encounter. But I quickly realized I was writing way too much for it to fit in a table. It was going to be like a one sheet. And it exploded into I think it ended up being 28 pages with custom art, PDF that now exists. It's a drive-through RPG bestseller. Yeah, and that's how it happened. I was just trying to figure out how to add some folk horror to my campaign and eventually just kind of typed up what I was already doing.
I feel like that's how a lot of projects start, is you look for something and you're like, well, nobody does this, so I guess I'm doing it now.
Yeah, and I think what's great about the tabletop RPG space is it's wide open right now. Like it's exploding, obviously. It's been exploding for the last 3 or 4 years, especially I think with the pandemic. But I mean, there's still not a lot out there. There's still plenty of room to add ideas. And that's not to say that other areas are saturated. Like, I'm not saying that board games or video games or books are saturated, but I think it is easier to find a pretty big gap in tabletop RPGs and put a flag there. And I mean, if you Google folk horror and D&D, I'm pretty sure my project is on the first page of Google. And I only released it a year ago.
That's really cool.
Yeah. we'll see how long that lasts. I know Google is doing some adjusting in the background with their algorithm as like AI becomes big. So we'll see how long it lasts. But last I checked, which of course I'm checking.
Am I still on the first page?
Yeah.
That's actually kind of how I started. Part of why I started my podcast is I was like, I want to listen to like interviews with dungeon masters so I can learn how to play better. And it's like, oh, I can't find anything, so I guess I'll start interviewing people. And now that I've been doing it for a while, now I'm starting to like find other people who do the same thing as me. And I don't know if they just all started at the same time as I did, or I just wasn't looking in the right spots originally. But there is more of us now. But
Even still, there's so many dungeon masters out there. There's so many game masters out there. There's so many creators out there. Like, I think it's great that there are more people interested in hosting these kind of interviews and these kind of shows, just because, I mean, like, you're not really competing with each other, right? I mean, there's you all have your own different styles and approach, and I think that's great. Let's talk about games all the time, you know?
yeah, well, and especially with like interviews, it's really fun to do an interview here and then jump over to theirs and do an interview for them,
Oh yeah,
and kind of do
100%.
the cross trade, whatever. So that's always a lot of fun, and I love how open the tabletop role playing space has been for me getting people on to interview, and there are so many different topics that we've gotten to talk about. It's so fun just to share everybody's expertise on the different little bits that they know. So
Yeah, I imagine you have learned a lot and like just found out a lot of stuff. God, that sounded really vague. I imagine that it has been very rewarding, is what I'm trying to say. I
yes,
bet
I
you've
think
had a lot of interesting conversations.
I have. I think I've interviewed. I've done more interviews than I've done running the game now, but I think the amount of conversations that I've had just makes when I do run that much better. Would you like to share where we can find you
Oh,
and
sure.
all of your projects?
Sure. So my name again is Cassi Mothwin. You can find out more about me on my website at cassimothwin.com. It's very fancy. Or you can find my projects and a link to pretty much everything on my itch page as well, cassi-mothwin.itch.io. And I stream on Twitch. I love to flip through different kinds of tabletop role-playing games, so you can come hang out and chat with me there while we learn some new mechanics or learn how a new game works. I also stream video games every once in a while. Yeah, check out my projects, check out my actual plays, follow me on Twitter. Let's talk about tabletop RPGs.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming on, Cassie.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been really great.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Dungeon Masters Toolkit podcast. You can find links to all of the products and resources that we talked about on the show in the show notes. And if you'd like to join the community or find out how to be on the show, check out our subreddit or join us in our Discord server.